Hey, welcome back folks. It is Crazy Welder here again today, and in today's video, or stream rather I should say, I'm going to be streaming Insomnia the Ark. Now this game is an RPG that has come out recently, which is sort of like in the same kind of vein as, you know, Wasteland 2 and Fallout, or plays some homage to those titles in particular. And I've already spent about 50 hours in the game playing through the single player. When they first released it, it had like a number of different patches, and a number of things kind of changed as time went on. And this game has had some of the best kind of post, delivery support on Steam that I've seen from pretty much any game that went through like a Kickstarter. Now this particular version of the game is 1.4. Now the devs are actually hard at work on version 1.5, and the awesome thing is that they have gone through a process where they went from Ogre Engine to Unreal Engine 4, and now they're updating the version of Unreal Engine 4 in this game to include better features and to fix some support. But without any further ado, let's just go ahead and get into it here so you can kind of see what it's all about. For those of you that haven't played Insomnia the Ark, I think it's honestly one of the better RPGs out there that you can play that is sort of like an action RPG, where you don't necessarily have the turn-based combat so much, but what you do have instead is essentially, a kind of over the top, but sort of behind the player view, so sort of third person, but sort of isometric at the same time. In terms of the way that you control your character. Now you do also aim manually as opposed to actually clicking and basically clicking to shoot, which is what you would do in like a Fallout, or for example games like Wasteland, or if you've played a game like Eden that recently came out. That one's another one where you kind of essentially end up going around and practically just clicking to shoot folks. Now, I apologize for my frame rate being kind of trash right now because unfortunately I am rendering a video in the background, so it's pretty terrible until the renderer decides to finish. But in essence, this is the game, so you have a massive game world. And to give you guys kind of a quick background on the story, so in essence, the station that we're on is actually a ship, a giant floating ship, or a station if you will, in the middle of space. You basically wake up out of hibernation because there was a giant explosion that ends up happening, and there's a cover-up and of course a whole conspiracy that happens in the process as well. And basically, because of your genetic makeup, you are a soldier, and you get to choose from a number of different classes when you first start out. Now, I kind of, essentially skipped that part for the most part because there's really not too much that happens in the beginning that's particularly, interesting. You get your typical character creation screen, you get to select your perks, if you will, and then from there on you kind of start out and you start getting a bunch of quests. Now, this area that we see right here is one of the biggest areas in the game. This is sort of like one of the biggest central hubs that you'll actually find in Insomnia in general. This area has a number of merchants. It's got a number of different things that you can do, a number of different quest givers that you can go to as well. Now, what you might notice is that I actually can't really look up in this game, and the reason is because of the way that the game was designed. It was originally supposed to be, again, an over-the-top sort of isometric view, so they never actually finished creating a ceiling in the game, if you will, or a skybox. So therefore, they've kind of stuck with this aiming scheme where you can only kind of aim down and to the sides, but you can't really aim up. And unfortunately, in the later stages of the game, that kind of comes to bite you, because if you try and kind of ambush some people that are above you, it makes it a lot more difficult to do any sort of aiming. But the whole area is incredibly well designed. It's got a very kind of like diesel punk atmosphere to everything that you'll basically find across the entire game. Just a really good design in general. The aesthetic of everything is absolutely gorgeous. As you can see, there's a quite rich world. Now, a lot of it is, mostly spanning this sort of kind of beige brownish color, a lot of bronze as well, that you will see throughout the game, but it really is just a really good art direction in general. Now, I've kind of already done certain quests throughout the game, so I've kind of got some gear as well for my main character. Now, one of the biggest kind of things that you do in this game is you sort of just walk around looking for random scraps of junk. Now, in this particular case, I'm going to try and see if I can find some scrap, and I guess I got to drink some water. And that's another one of those mechanics that they have in this game where you can actually go hungry, and you can also get quite thirsty as you are going through the game itself. But nonetheless, it's actually pretty fun because it's not terribly annoying, the the mechanic of eating food or getting drink. The only problem really is that all of this stuff tends to be fairly expensive. So kind of as you're going through the game, you end up having to be very careful in terms of watching your food supplies and your water supplies, because what ends up happening is if you don't end up watching them, then you start losing health really quickly. And the other issue is that by and large the game is fairly brutal, even on the difficulty level that I'm playing, which is the normal difficulty level. So you'll get a lot of issues in terms of dying quickly if you're not careful. So you do have to kind of have pretty good timing in general. Now all of the dialogue in this game is your typical kind of walk up to a guy, see a bunch of text, and then that's sort of the dialogue. You choose the dialogue options from there, but nobody actually ever speaks in the game except for in the beginning and ending cutscenes. So those are really the only times that you'll hear somebody speak, or unless it's over the PA system. But by and large, none of the characters have actual spoken dialogue. But again, you have to consider the fact that this was made by a very small team, and a small team of folks that really had very limited resources in making the game. So you do have to kind of cut them some slack. So, with that said, as again, you can also have your inventory screen, which is like your pretty typical inventory management. You have a number of slots which are dictated by what you have in your backpack, and you can get different backpacks to suit the different playstyles that you have. The general gist is that when you do have a larger backpack, it tends to affect your combat ability, specifically in terms of the amount of damage that you can kind of deal to people, probably because of the fact that you end up having to lug around this heavy thing and it affects your accuracy, and so on. Now you can also see that you have got a bunch of slots for armor. So you have a helmet, you have your main jacket, and you also have basically your pants or leggings, whatever you want to call them, that give you the 3 armor slots. But you can choose to have different kinds of loadouts. If you don't want to go for armor, you can also go for helmets or hats that give you certain stat boosts. By and large, what I found is that if you go for a hat or certain types of goggles, they typically give you stats for damage or range increases, instead of, for example, giving you armor. So you'll win in terms of the certain boosts that you get to certain perks, but then you'll lose out on armor, so you'll take more damage, but you can kind of dish out more, if that makes sense. Or alternatively, your bullets will actually land, as opposed to if you're wearing some heavy, big helmet. But some of this stuff is also affected by the type of player you choose. You want to be pretty careful when you choose your character in terms of figuring out what kind of armor ratings they're supposed to wear. So if your character is a bruiser and they are a melee character, they're probably going to want to have heavy armor on versus light armor, again because you're going to be up and close and personal, versus if you're somebody who's a gunner, you'd probably want like medium armor, and then obviously long range weapons, and possibly like a hat that can give you that additional range as well. You've also got 2 primary weapon slots for your main rifle and your sidearm. The sidearms can take anything up to a submachine gun, if I recall correctly, and then the main sort of slot will be your heavy machine guns, sniper rifles, things like that, shotguns. All of that's kind of in there. Later on, you get things like laser pistols, and I believe there's even a laser rifle in the game. I've never encountered it before. And you've also got your melee slot, and this comes in handy in certain later portions of the game where your character is essentially forced into being melee only. And you have your typical loadouts of ammo, random junk that you collect, and as well as supplies as you go throughout the different areas in the game. So there's a lot of, sort of different things to collect. And there are some random, folks that you will see who are in here. Now, getters are people that are essentially living in the slums of this particular society. And in general, the majority of the game takes place within the slums. Now, there are basically 3 distinct districts. You've got the junkyard, which is sort of the lowest tier and the sketchiest area in the game. Then you've got the slums, which is where I'm at right now. And then the last portion, or some portions of the game, end up taking place in the urb, which is sort of like the urban area, and it's more for the rich, the wealthy, and the people that control basically the entire station and the various parts of it, the substations, and so on. Now, this particular area is, I believe, a strip club or something along those lines, and so you can't actually talk to certain strippers if you choose to, but I found that for whatever reason talking to them seems to be kind of bugged. It seems like they tell you to come back, but then they never actually end up letting you come back and do anything at any point in the game. And this happens to a couple of characters, and I think that's something they're going to actually fix once 1.5 comes out. But so far, I think that they haven't really done too much in terms of fixing this kind of stuff. I'm just going to go ahead and purchase some stuff from this merchant here, because I definitely need some more drinks on hand. And then we're probably going to go ahead and see if we can head out to a different area and take some additional quests on, because it looks like I've, for the most part, basically done everything that I can do in here. And so something else that you get is you get a giant mini-map in this game, which of course just makes life a lot easier because it makes it super simple to navigate around. The only downside, I think, is that it takes kind of a while to run around through the mini-map, so when you're traveling there's not really like a fast travel option per se. Which is really my only major concern with the game, is that it takes forever to travel. But the upside is that you can get certain perks that increase your map speed and that also make you stealthy in the map, which means you're less likely to encounter random enemies as you're sort of walking around and finding different things to do on the map itself. The other kind of, issue I found is that it doesn't seem like you can actually travel to any spot that you wish to on the map. You have to actually travel between different points or different set points, meaning locations that you've actually discovered before. So in that sense, there's a limit in terms of what you can do and how far you can travel. And let's see if I can actually take a look at this this junk pile right here. Looks like I've already looted that one. So by and large, you want to collect as much of that stuff as you can, because you can actually craft things like armor. You can craft things like weapon casings or bullets. You can craft different parts of weapons as well, so if you need to repair weapons, you can craft the parts to do so. Now, I haven't really worked out the economy in terms of if it's worth it more to buy ammo versus craft it out of the stuff that you found, because you can sell the stuff that you found to then craft stuff out of it. But I haven't really looked at the math behind that yet. It may just be that it's a lot simpler to craft stuff out of the things that you find throughout the map in general. Whether or not that actually makes a whole lot of sense, I'm not sure yet. Even though I've spent a bunch of hours in the game, I feel like I might have been playing it wrong. But as you can see here, we've got the mini-map, and so you can see the whole station out in front of you now. And sort of as you start traveling, more of these slots open up. Now, by and large, everything happens in this sort of left corner that's closest to you in the game. And then from there on, you sort of start just finding different stations, different areas. And as you're traveling between the different points, at any given time, you could run into things they call marauders, which are basically just a bunch of renegades that end up attacking you. They're sort of against the herb and against the whole, general population and against the military. So in essence, they are against you. So you end up running into them. Now, there are also mechanized suits in this game that you can wear yourself during certain points, but also that you will actually encounter randomly throughout the game. And I have found that when you actually run into those guys, most of the time it's better to kind of just try and sneak and then get around them, because if you actually try and fight them, you end up losing a bunch of health, you end up wasting a bunch of ammo, and really you don't get that much out of them. You can occasionally get some grenades or some really heavy, rifle rounds out of them. But again, that's not something that's worth the health that you're gonna waste and then end up having to buy and replenish afterwards, because the amount there really doesn't add up. So it doesn't make sense to kind of go that route. So let's see if we run into some action here. Let's see what this guy has to say. All right, so let's see, looks like this guy's actually going to give me something because of my character perk. And so that's one of those things that you can kind of pick up on in the beginning. There are thing masters, which are basically mechanics or craftsmen, which is what I am. And when it comes to talking to certain other people that are also getters, as they call them in this game, you have the ability to persuade them towards certain, basically, conversational points that you otherwise wouldn't have if you didn't have that, specific character trait. You can also be a scammer, which I believe is one of the character traits that you get as one of the sort of sneakier characters in the game. And that one also allows you some different conversational paths. But of course, you can also unlock these perks sort of independently as you go through the game, to give you some additional help in terms of, you know, bartering or getting additional dialogue options that you otherwise wouldn't have had. And that's something that actually ends up really coming into play towards the later chapters in the game, where you end up having to convince people to do certain things for you, or to give up certain bits of information that you otherwise just simply wouldn't have gotten. So, but again, that's a choice that you can make yourself. Sometimes the choices that you make earlier in the game will end up sort of making the choice for you later on, in a manner of speaking, and then if you don't have the conversational options to get out of it, then it becomes a little bit more black and white in terms of what you can do. But according to the developers, the game does have 12 endings. I have seen, I believe, 3 of them during my playthroughs, but the last playthrough that I did was pretty brutal, and I ended up choosing one of the factions over the other. And so that's something we'll get into a little bit later as I'll be doing the streams, as you'll see the different factions that you see throughout the game. So the result is that you get a choice between either choosing one faction or another, and between cooperating with the government in terms of figuring out the issue that your character has. Now, the game is not called Insomnia for a reason. The reason they call it is because the people that are in the ship suffer from something called somnia, which basically has the effect of destroying your mind slowly, and there are some parallels in terms of basically a separate kind of entity that's almost got its own mind that ends up penetrating the ship in a manner of speaking, and then people who come in contact with that entity or that energy end up experiencing somnia, and a lot of people that have been on the ship for a while end up experiencing this, your character included. And so one of the other character traits that you can have is, you know, actually a resistance to somnia, and you can also help the government entity that is seeming to take on a conspiracy later on to figure out what this whole somnia deal is and see if you can actually recover from it. I don't believe that in my playthrough I ever actually found a solution, but they did give me a bunch of medicine to kind of help counter the effects. Also, what you will see throughout the game, and I'm also pretty terrible at that particular section, is, you know, the actual ability to counter certain enemies that are basically like ghosts that come out of somnia, from at least what I can tell. If you actually know more, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. But to me, they feel like ghosts of the past that are potentially from, you know, other dimensions, who can basically damage you and give you a higher somnia level if you eventually take too much, you know, sort of damage from these monsters. You actually end up going insane, and you actually do get an achievement for, you know, basically succumbing to somnia later on, but that's something that you will see is, you know, not too common, but you do have to look out for these enemies. They'll occasionally pop up, and you'll get a little kind of icon that says disappear to basically make them disappear, and you kind of hold the button down so that they end up going away. If we end up running into them in this playthrough, I'll kind of see if I can show you guys that, and you can see I've actually become over encumbered here. So let's see if I can take this shotgun apart. First, I'm going to try and see if the durability, well, I guess the durability level is pretty much the same. So I'm going to disassemble this one for parts, because I'm probably going to need to repair my shotgun later on as I play, since the weapons in this game actually do degrade over time. Now, something else you saw me do is I actually ended up hacking or putting together this generator. You'll find a lot of these broken throughout the game, and so one of the things that you want to do is essentially just go ahead and repair them. The reason why I want to do that is because it gives you a bunch of different stuff. Sometimes it's worth it, sometimes it's not, but typically if you're exploring anyway, you're going to be running into a lot of, you know, these boxes that give you the parts needed to repair the generators. And then typically from that point forward, you can use those parts to repair the generators and potentially get something much more valuable in return. Now, the great thing is that there's a lot of the stuff that you can just disassemble for parts, and that typically ends up giving you stuff and also making it, interestingly, a little bit lighter for you to carry. So that's one of those things that I've kind of discovered, but that might just be a bug in this particular version of the game before they kind of move on to version 1.5. So some things may still get fixed later on. You know, some things might not. It just kind of depends. Right now, I'm still kind of waiting on that part to come out because they actually have implemented DirectX 12 in this latest patch, which means it's going to run a lot better on my Vega FE card, since the Vega FE cards tend to be, you know, a lot more optimized for DirectX. So that's kind of one of those things that ends up just making your life a heck of a lot easier at that point. So let's see, I'm going to try and sell some of this stuff because I don't actually really need it. Looks like I have a bunch of this stuff in here. And so all of these things I'm not currently using, so I don't need them. And therefore, I can by and large just get some of my money back from what I've been doing so far. Let's see. So yeah, you can see this backpack tells you that the damage that you end up receiving is -8. So basically the damage that you deal, I mean to say, is reduced. And also the damage that you do from your gunshots is reduced as well. So that's kind of one of the issues of using things like this, unfortunately. So then you've got a hat that gives you extra lock picking, and you've got some other various parts. And one of these TVs actually ends up being a quest item that I've already done. Now, you can also take apart these sort of old school electronics, as they call them, for things that you can actually use later on. So one of the really important pieces that you'll actually run into in the game is basically the ability to build better weapons and upgrade certain weapons as you go forth. Now, by and large, you tend to find them, but you can also buy certain pieces here and there, and that just makes you know, life again a lot easier for you, because you'll actually be able to take enemies out a lot faster. Now let's see, I believe that the last time I was using my pistol I had some serious issues, but let's see, I guess they don't want me taking that out in here. I'm going to try and see if I can actually fix my rifle, and looks like I can. So you generally want to fix your items, because you will see that when you start having the rifle deplete, and you can tell basically by looking at the little bars that are underneath the gun itself, when it depletes in terms of its quality, it actually ends up losing accuracy, and it ends up losing the damage points that it does. So you typically want to keep all of your stuff in really high you know, maintenance, because otherwise it just ends up basically hurting you in terms of the damage that you can do to people, mostly bad guys, obviously. But there are certain neutral characters that you can shoot as well, if you choose to want to take their stuff. But from what I figured out, I believe that if you end up stealing stuff from other getters, or if you end up, for example, kind of killing them randomly, it tends to give you sort of bad karma in the game, in the sense that you don't get the good endings, from what I could tell, at least during my last playthrough. Again, I could be wrong, but this is just my observation from having played the game for kind of some time now. So there's some, you know, there's some kind of nuances there that end up happening, and you will see that you'll run into these caravans and things like that throughout the various parts of the station as you travel. Now, sometimes, you know, they actually have decent stuff. Other times they're pretty much completely useless, but you know, it's always good to just check, because you can always find random things that you can then sell back to them for sometimes good money. And again, that's, you know, all the better for you, because you can buy ammo and you can buy medical supplies and so on and so forth. It just makes, you know, the whole game a lot easier at that point, because it's very difficult to get through this game without necessarily being able to, you know, buy or sell things. It's basically what you have to do. You just end up buying and selling pretty much most of the time, just to kind of stay afloat. Now, something else is that you typically want to keep these grenades on hand, just in case you ever do run into like one of those guys in a mechanized suit. They call them mass suits. That's M-A-S for anyone who's wondering. And basically, the mass suits do a massive amount of damage, and if you want to stay away from them, one of the best things to do is basically chuck grenades at them until they've been damaged enough to the point where you can shoot them with your shotgun from behind cover and take them down. Now, this guy has a bunch of grenades, but I'm hoping that I'm not going to be running into too much resistance in this next section. I don't believe that this next mission actually has a mass suit that I'll be going against, which is good, because I don't really want to be losing any health, because that also damages your armor, and when it damages your armor, you got to carry a bunch of steel plates and then repair it, and that just makes the whole process really messy, because that weight could have been used for something else, and it affects your speed. And typically, if you can't run away from your enemies, you're going to take a bunch of damage, or especially if you can't, you know, sort of sprint away from a dangerous zone. That typically just makes it a nightmare for traveling anywhere you want to go. I'm actually going to go ahead and just save on this section right here because I don't know what I'm going to be running into. I could actually run into somebody with a mass randomly. I might not. So let's see. Looks like I've got a potential chance to get some more scrap here. Now, one of the perks that you get in the game actually allows you to skip some of these encounters, I believe, or just not, you know, find them in general, which can be a potential advantage, especially if, you know, if your character happens to be pretty low on health. So there's always that. But I can't tell, is this guy actually going to attack me? I can't quite tell here. See, I guess they're not. There's some weird dialogue, though, that's for sure. But you can see that if you're sort of sneaking up on people, now it disappeared here because they've spotted me, but you can actually execute sneakily and then end up not making a bunch of noise. So this is kind of their way of letting you do stealth in the game. It's not the greatest stealth system because it's never really entirely obvious, you know, whether or not you actually end up being in a hidden area or in an exposed area. I personally have had a very hard time figuring that out, but I guess for the most part you just use common sense. If there's light, you typically want to stay away from it, and if the enemy has line of sight, well then again, just kind of steer clear. Now if you end up stealing this guy's junk or rummaging through his junk, then he basically ends up attacking you afterwards because, you know, he doesn't like people digging through his stuff, and potentially that ends up giving you sort of negative points or negative karma. And the last time I ran into him, I actually ended up attacking him, mainly because I didn't realize that that was going to happen. But again, just, you know, use common sense. If someone's, you know, rummaging and you end up taking their stuff for which they worked really hard for, they're probably going to be pretty pissed. So there's always that kind of, you know, negative connotation there. And now I don't know if the characters in other parts of the map end up treating you differently if you kill one of the getters. I haven't really seen to it that much. But, you know, it is always possible, and it is always possible that it potentially affects certain endgame options later on as the game progresses. Now, this particular mission is one of the first missions that you do for the commander or the captain. I believe it's Captain Rebel, who's one of the commanding officers for your unit, basically. And so this particular area is being overrun, I believe, by rebels at this point. You will kind of see that later on in the game, you might end up liking their perspective more than the perspective of the military, but that's, you know, something that ends up being on you as far as making that actual choice at that point on. Whether or not you end up fully committing to that, or whether or not you end up kind of going to you know, do something different from, you know, for example, what I did. In my initial playthrough, I ended up actually siding with the rebels later on, mainly because their cause seemed to be a lot more legitimate than the folks who were actually trying to cover up a conspiracy within the game. I'm not going to spoil any more juicy details for you, as I think the story is actually very cool, and I don't think that you should actually have to, you know, go through that and have me completely ruin all the fun. So with that said, and actually it looks like I went to the wrong section there, but these two checkpoints right here basically are where some of the major turning points in the game happen. And so one of the biggest areas here is, you know, of course this one, where you kind of get to see the level of corruption and the level of unrest that's been brewing on this station over the years, as the fighting's been going on back and forth between the two different major factions, which is the military and the renegades. So you see this guy has actually got some really neat armor and a really fancy machine gun. I have found that those machine guns tend to run out of ammo incredibly quickly, so I tend to kind of stay away from them because that gets really expensive really quick. But, you know, it is something that you can get later on to essentially beef up your arsenal. And I believe there's also a guy that can sell me stuff here, so I should be able to get some additional equipment here. And let's see what else we got. Looks like just an open container. So yeah, it looks like this guy's got some stuff for me. see what kind of things he has. So this backpack seems to get you less negatives than some of the other things. And this guy, pretty decent rifle, but it looks like it's actually telling me that its accuracy is lower than my current rifle, which would make sense because it is a machine gun after all. Let's see if I can sell some of my stuff here. Any additional things? Maybe I should hold on to that one actually, but I'll definitely get rid of the iron plates. Not going to be using those guys anytime soon. And the rest of the stuff I can actually probably keep. Now the one thing that's been kind of annoying is that all of the cash in this game doesn't seem to ever stack on itself, so whenever you get new cash, it just ends up sort of taking up a bunch of random slots in your inventory, which is mostly annoying. But the nice thing is that you can kind of keep piling stuff on into your backpack, and by and large you typically have enough slots for everything. I've basically not run out for the majority of my gameplay the last time, but then again the last time I also had a really big backpack. This time I just kind of have a mini one, so we'll see kind of how that goes. I believe there's somebody that I'm supposed to report to here, so let's see what they say. Yeah, and unfortunately it does end up actually getting a lot worse, because there ends up being a massive fight just shortly here. But I'm going to try and see if I can sort of get some more stuff. So there I can now, I found a schematic, so I'll be able to actually build these grenades, which is really convenient because these grenades cost a fortune, and so you always want to read these things. And then the nice thing is that after you're done reading, you don't need to actually hold on to the book, so you can just go over to one of the local merchants and then you can sell it for cash, which is one of my favorite features of this game, because even though it's not much, it does give you some money back that you can then spend on other stuff. Plus it doesn't end up taking the extra space in your inventory. Now something else I've noticed is that if you come across books, like actual books, not like schematic books, you can read those to get some additional experience points, which makes your character level up a little bit faster, which is very nice. So let's see. What does this guy say? He's probably going to be like, hey, go through this door. And so we're going to go through the door. Unless, of course, he doesn't want me to go through the door just yet, so I might have actually kind of jumped the gun on that one. Let's see. Let's take a look here. It's not this guy. I wonder if it's one of the other guys that's standing around over here. I kind of keep forgetting. Ah, there we go. Looks like it just took a little bit. I guess the door just takes a little while to get opened. Now one thing I've noticed is that my graphics card seems to drop its clock during any new loading scenes, and I'm not sure if that's an AMD driver issue or if it's down to this game's engine, but it certainly seems like there's some stuff going on, and you can see there's a ghost from somebody that's previously been there. And I guess I'm overloaded again, but I'm just gonna have to deal with it, I suppose. Okay, so I'm going to see if I can dig through this junk, see if I can get some extra stuff, and then we're just going to have to proceed through this tunnel here ahead of me and get this done, because I don't think... I wonder if they actually let me go back. I doubt they do. It'd be nice if I could sell some of this stuff before proceeding. Yeah, so it looks like the door is now locked, and unfortunately I am overloaded, so that sucks because I can't run. But on the other hand, I think it'd be okay if I can just hold on to some of this stuff for now. Actually, I wonder if I can store some of this stuff in here and possibly come back to it later on. That might be a good way to sort of offload some of the random junk that I have without having to carry it with me, because I know I'm going to be able to get back into this area. Probably keep that just in case. And I typically found that some of the more peculiar things in this game you generally want to hold on to, mainly because they come in handy again in the later stages of the game, which just makes your life 10 times easier at that point. Now, let's see, I don't really need this ticket, but I doubt that it actually takes up that much space or anything else, and I don't need this Cryoma stuff. But the rest of these things I can definitely hold on to. Oh yeah, way better. Hopefully this stuff doesn't disappear when I come back, because it's definitely worth quite a bit. And I totally almost blew myself up right there. Now these mine sequences, if you guys have ever played the Splinter Cell games, they're pretty similar in the sense that you have to basically align the two signal wavelengths, and that certainly makes you know, for some explosive things that you end up and you know, essentially selling later on. I'm gonna try and go very slowly here because I believe that they hide these mines just in the worst places around this particular section. I can never remember where exactly they are, but I think that they... Let's see, I guess there's not one there. For some reason I thought there totally was. But better safe than sorry. I'm just gonna go ahead and eat some food, since I'm getting hungry as well. Alright, so there's another mine. I'm gonna go ahead and try and save right here, because I always manage to find a way to screw this up every time I do it. That one was a little bit easier than I had predicted, actually. Ended up getting a bunch of really good stuff out of it. Now, somewhere around here, get a bunch of people running at me and taking taking some pot shots. I think it's shortly after this mine, actually, if I recall correctly. Thankfully, that one was also pretty easy as well. Sometimes I actually mess it up and then end up basically just blowing myself up, which is not fun. And it actually does do quite a bit of damage too, so you generally want to be pretty careful with these mines because they are not to be trifled with. They definitely can bring your health down to some dangerous levels, but on the other hand, you can use the explosives to craft grenades and things of that nature, which again just make life that much easier for you. And then let's see, I guess I'm gonna have to go travel this way. Should probably save again just in case I get shot. I can never remember if they hide more mines around this area, but I think that they actually do. Oh boy. Okay, so here we go. There's going to be some people that are going to try and shoot at me. Now I think that I should be able to take some shots at them from here. I guess not. I might actually have to go back, see if I can shoot at them from here. No, so I end up hitting the pipe, unfortunately. Alright, so these guys are already taking shots at me, which is fantastic, of course. And you get scope bloom, so you want to be kind of careful that you don't start shooting before your scope has, you know, ended up, you know, essentially getting out of the bloom mode, because otherwise you end up just wasting ammo and you're not nearly as accurate as you would otherwise be. Now, I don't remember, but I think at this stage we do get some more guys that end up coming down this way, so I'm just going to go ahead and reload my rifle. Doesn't look like I also have a whole lot of cartridges left for that particular rifle, which is unfortunate. But with that said, let me see if I can actually disarm some of these mines while I'm here. These things do get kind of annoying when there's a lot of them, but at the same time I'm not going to complain because I'm going to be able to sell these explosive parts for a bunch of really good money later on, or I might just end up making some grenades out of them. I haven't really quite decided yet. And then I'm just gonna go ahead and loot this guy. And hopefully not blow up. Yeah, so this guy is one of the guys who's, you know, a rebel. I'm not even sure. I guess I can probably try and disarm this explosive. Potentially might be worthwhile if I can stop some of the Yeah, so there we go. That mine just completely took me out, and that's exactly why you save before you end up taking these things on, because they will basically tear you a new asshole. And even though my armor is at 35, which is pretty high up for, you know, a basically noob character, this thing still does quite a significant amount of damage. So let's see. I guess I should probably be heading the other direction. Thank God that one was a little bit easier as well. Now let's see, is this guy? I guess that's the friendly dude. Go ahead and save one more time just in case. You always want to save because this game is incredibly unpredictable in terms of things that happen. Also, these barrels are explodey, which is always a lot of fun. But unfortunately for me, this guy's hiding all the way back there. And I think I'm probably better off trying to blow this up before it blows me up. Okay, so we got a bunch of dudes, and this guy's got some stuff that I really don't like, which is a melee weapon. Oh boy. Yeah, so that guy definitely could have done some serious damage to me. Thankfully, it wasn't as big of a deal. But I think I'm probably going to swap over to my shotgun because I feel like that's a better bet in this environment right now. Let's see, I think one of these guys was hiding back here. Unless, of course, he ran off. I guess he's right there. So actually, I'm going to go ahead and switch back to my rifle. Because he's pretty far. And generally when these guys are far, you want to not use the shotgun. Pretty common sense stuff. Let's see if he's going to come back. Yeah, so the rifle thankfully makes quick work of these guys, which is nice. But you never know. Gonna go ahead and reload just in case. And I guess it still thinks that I'm in combat for whatever reason. Probably because there's another guy right around the corner in here. And there sure is. But thankfully he was fairly easy to take out. It's a nice thing about having the 10mm revolver. Now, one thing I have to note is that sometimes the enemy bodies won't let you actually interact and pick stuff up off of them, and I think that has to do with the sort of boxes that are around them that haven't really been completely tweaked in this version of the game. Again, this is 1.4, so things are not exactly peachy. And generally, you want to, anytime you find a picture, you want to look at it because that will allow you to complete a mission later on in the game. I'm not sure who yelled there. That was kind of weird. But at any rate, well, I guess this getter is angry with me, but I'm just going to let him be because really he doesn't pose a threat currently. Let's see if I can disarm this here explosive charge. Son of a gun, this one's really tight. But thankfully I managed to still grab it anyway. Let's see if these guys are back there again. No, they're definitely somewhere. I wonder if one of them is... Oh, that's weird. They're making a bunch of noises, but then, like, they're not... Oh, here we go. Yeah, so I'm just gonna go ahead and kind of back away from that dude because I don't want to deal with him until I've actually got some decent distance on him. And actually, I'm able to shoot him pretty easily from over here, which is kind of cool. Go ahead and save right here as well, just in case. Yeah, so the last time I actually played this, my character didn't have the explosive skills necessary to disarm this stuff, so that was kind of a major pain because I'm pretty sure that that impacts sort of what you're actually able to do in as far as, you know, the explosions that end up wreaking havoc throughout the station after this mission, because everything ends up essentially just going sideways. Oh man. Damn, that actually spooked me. Yeah, these mines can be kind of tricky sometimes, because they explode on you whenever you run out of time. So, and I've just been clicking through this thing left and right for no good reason. Okay, so let's see if we can potentially, I don't even know if, oh damn, it's gonna be the other way. Nice, okay, so that one was a little bit easier this time around. Let's see what it's giving me for skills here. I'm probably gonna hold off on this one for now. Let's see. Yeah, so that's one of those things that I definitely want to pick up is, I'd want to pick up some defensive skills, that's for sure. Makes it just a little bit easier. And so here's actually the one that I was talking about earlier. This one gives you stealth as you're traveling through the minimap, and it also increases your speed throughout traveling. This one increases your Insomnia resistance, and then you've got basic things like health and endurance, meaning how fast you can run and, you know, how many things that you can carry and stuff along those lines. Obviously hacking machines, being a mechanic or repairman, and you know, also explosive skills, which again is a pretty useful one in general. And I think I'm going to try and see if maybe I can actually bump this skill up pretty soon. I don't know if I necessarily want to do it just yet. I may need to read some additional books before I do anything else. Ooh, this guy's actually dealing some massive damage to me. So probably just going to go ahead and load this section back up, because I don't really want to lose that much health this early on in this section, because it ends up getting a lot gnarlier later on. Basically, it just ends up becoming like a full-scale war, and you can't really get away from it, so there's always that unfortunate part of this. And actually, let me see if I can sprint to these barrels, maybe. Thankfully, that dude right there wasn't really that big of a threat, but this guy, on the other hand, might be a bit of a problem for me. I'm gonna try and see if I can wait until he stops firing, and then see if I can knock out those barrels next to him, potentially. That would be a big win for me. There we go. That'll at least do some damage. It actually looks like that killed him. Unfortunately, I can't pick up his machine gun. I really wish that you could pick up the enemy's guns, because a lot of times they just end up having stuff that's way better than your stuff. It's almost like inevitable that they end up having better things. Oh boy. That was actually not at all what I wanted to do. Almost ran into another mine. And of course, as soon as I went for the mine, it decided to go straight for the lock and blow me up. Basically ended up becoming a parcel donkey for that mine, because that mine definitely rode me pretty hard. Let's see. I wonder if I can just circle around it. Just do a little rim job on this mine. There we go. Oh, perfect. That was a lot easier than I expected. And then just gonna go ahead and try and hack this thing here. I'm always terrible at these things because they feel like frickin' Simon Says, and I've never been too good at those. But this one was actually not too difficult, thankfully. Oh boy, I don't know if those guys are good or bad. I think they might be actually okay. Yeah, I guess these guys are okay. Well, I'm just gonna head back for now, because I think that there's some more stuff that I can find this way before heading over fully. Yeah, so there's a container, and it's got some really nice stuff in there. Now, I believe that in here in the water there's another container, and of course I end up eating it on the mine, which is incredible, but that's fine. So that's the one thing about these tunnels here, is that there's just mines everywhere, so you basically just have to look on the ground this entire mission. Thankfully, later on in the games, they become a little bit more sparse, so this is really kind of the only section where things are sort of dicey. But, you know, with that said, it's not all bad news bears. Now the problem is I think I've totally messed that one up because I didn't remember where exactly these things are supposed to be. Alright, so not too bad. Yeah. And this whole area, it's interesting because you don't actually get to ever kind of go back into the sewers as much again, which is sort of an annoying part actually, because you would think that you'd be able to avoid some combat by going under certain sections of the station, but I guess for one reason or another the developers felt like, or maybe they just didn't have time to really model those areas to give you the ability to do more of that. Would have been a little bit nice to be able to actually navigate these areas better, but you know, it is what it is at the end of the day. Again, you have to consider the fact that this was a really small team that ended up doing this this section, so not much we can really do. Now for this part, I believe that we have to talk these guys out of blowing up the station or something along those lines. So I'm gonna go ahead and just take my shotgun out and see if I can't talk to these fools. Alright, so let's see what choices I have here. Alright, so it looks like I've been able to avoid that whole situation, which is pretty nice. And got some nice parts out of that. Now there's also some lock picking that you can do, so I'm gonna go ahead and try that really quick here. Basically, as soon as it hits these little points, and I sucked at that one, you just want to hit space, which is the key to engage, and then you just open the lock. Really straightforward. Although if your lock picking skill is low, the tumblers spin faster, and then if your lock picking skill is higher, then the tumblers end up spinning, you know, significantly slower. So that's kind of the way that they make this whole thing work. Now I believe that up on top things are really dicey. So let's see how it's all going. Yeah, it looks like they're basically just murdering the crowds in here. Because again, the whole, you know, military organization is pretty corrupt just throughout. So they really don't care for any of the civilians, you know, in general in this whole area. And it's kind of, you know, it's kind of sad, but it's just sort of also a way of life for these guys. They end up always being at each other's throats, so that's just how it goes. I'm gonna steal a bunch of stuff here because, you know, why not? It's free gear. Even though, yes, I'm stealing from technically my own guys, I don't particularly care because I will be able to sell this stuff and get money, and that's what it's all about. Basically getting rich to other people's expense, so I don't mind one bit. Now then, let's see if I can talk to this dude right here. Alright, got through that section. Let's see if they'll let me go back to here and actually get my stuff. Oh man, they won't let me go back. So I wonder if I'll have to navigate the entire area to get back there. I wonder if this door is still open. I hope it is. Okay, so I think I should still be able to get back to the section that I was in and sell my stuff, because I had left a bunch of things at those crates back there, and it'd be a real shame if I couldn't sell some of this stuff back at the very least. Alright, got some credits, got some grenades. Always a big win. Yeah, I think I'm honestly just gonna sell these because I can end up getting a bunch of really good stuff out of that. this I don't really need. The dirty water you generally don't want to drink either, unless you're like, you know, really strapped for, you know, water and you basically just can't do anything else. Same with the burgers as well. I believe I'm going to hold on to the Creomer liquor because I think that later on in the game somebody actually asks for it. Now these drinks, they can give you some combat effects, which are temporary, but I generally find that it's really not worth it in terms of like what you actually get out of it. So it's really no good. Now let's see, I think this shotgun does a little bit more damage than my shotgun. So I'm going to try and see what mine does. Yeah, so I'm just going to go ahead and take it apart, which means you get ammo out of it. And then I'm going to sell it back to this dude because I'm going to buy his fancy shotgun. I believe I should have enough money for that. Let's see, so that's 4 grand. But I could also get this guy, but that one's 10 grand. So maybe I'll just stick to the shotgun for now. And call it a day. Because it's definitely worthwhile getting shotguns that do damage. You end up really running into a lot of folks that can do damage up close. And so if you can pull out your shotgun on them and just blow them away really quick, it makes a big difference. Especially for a lot of the creatures that you meet in game. By and large, the shotguns deal a lot more damage to those guys than the rifles, from my experience at least. So you typically want to, you know, kind of take those guys out and just go from there at that point. I'm gonna try and see, let's see, I guess that guy doesn't really have too much to say to me. Hopefully I don't end up blowing myself up in the process. But yeah, I mean, in general, the structure of this game is, you know, you go around, you kind of collect tons of loot, you end up getting a bunch of different new weapons, and you pretty much always kind of want to upgrade your weapons because the last thing that you want to do is not keep up with the latest and greatest and then end up going up against people that do way more damage. And as you saw, you know, some of those guys had like machine guns already, which, you know, obviously I do not have a machine gun, but I could have bought it for 10 grand, and there's a freaking mine over there because of course there is. So I'm going to try and see if I can load another checkpoint back here. I don't wonder how far back it's going to send me this time around. Probably going to send me back pretty far. Now one thing is, I also haven't seen this section of the herb that they actually show during this particular part of the loading screen. Now, you know, it could just be because I, you know, I didn't join a certain faction, or maybe joined the wrong faction and didn't get that far to do that step. I'm not 100% sure, because I know that during my last playthrough, because of the fact that I basically ended up locking myself out of certain areas, I couldn't find certain items that would allow me to complete quests, and that definitely meant that there are probably some areas that I otherwise would have been able to explore, but couldn't this time around, just simply because of the fact that I ended up proceeding too far into the game, resulting in me being unable to essentially do certain parts of the missions that I actually really wanted to do. Now, it looks like, I can't tell, is this guy... Ah, it's just a getter. Okay, so that's actually not that big of a deal. This time I'm going to try and play it smart and actually save my game prior to heading into the next area. I also wish there was a much better jump mechanic than just rolling, but as it stands... Alright, so let's see. I think one of the mines that was here was the one that blew me up. I guess I must have skipped it the other time around. Maybe it wasn't this one. Maybe it was the guy over here. Yep, so that's the one. That one was quite well hidden, actually. Alrighty. Son of a gun, of course, as soon as I head over to the next area, there's another mine that explodes. But the good thing about this is, again, we can scavenge these resources and sell them and get a bunch of good cash that will then net us better weapons, which is always a win-win. You're pretty much always fighting in this game. There's not really a time that you aren't, so generally speaking, the better the weapons that you have, the higher the chance of your survival. So you pretty much always want to have weapons that are good, or at least better than what you had before. So it's always a win-win. And the other nice part is that you get to level up your character a little bit faster, and I'm not sure what actually happened there. But anyway, so you end up leveling up a little bit faster because you can kill more people. So even if you otherwise would have avoided confrontation, it's probably just a good idea to go in there and kill those guys, because then you just end up getting more experience points, and you end up potentially finding some new stuff that you otherwise would not have found. So let's see if I can do this again. Looks like it actually ended up going into the same exact slot as it did last time, which is kind of weird. I would have expected it to do something different, but I guess they never reset that particular mechanism. Really sucks that I have to crawl around to get through this section, because I thought that I had already cleared all these mines out, but I guess maybe the game possibly resets them after you've been through a certain area. Yeah, because I don't recall having to disarm that mine either. Oh boy, okay, so... yeah, this is weird. Alright, so those mines I didn't have to disarm. So that's actually kind of a trip. But that's fine, because I now, once again, have a bunch of stuff that I can sell. And actually, if we take a look, I believe that this hat is one of the ones. So yeah, you can see that this one, it allows you to trade, you know, at a slightly better point, which means you get better deals on stuff, and also your gunshots deal more damage when you wear the hat. But of course, the downside is that you don't get the benefit of, you know, actually being able to do as much defense. So then when you get hit, ultimately it ends up hurting you quite significantly. Now let's see if I recall. Yeah, I guess that one still won't let me open the door. But I believe that you get a magnetic key for that door at some point later on, so you can return and do an additional sort of part of that substation. Let's see, I guess I can talk to that guy at the very least, which is kind of cool. But this whole section is, you know, pretty dangerous in general, especially if you don't have good armor. And, you know, I believe that as soon as you start getting more armor, the enemy ends up actually becoming much more advanced in terms of their weapons and armor as well. And the renegades typically always outgun you, which is kind of the one downside with this particular kind of mission. And I believe that at this point, all we really have to do is return to the main area and talk to Captain Rebo, and at that point, that mission is complete. And that'll be sort of it for this stream for today, before we continue on to the next section. And I guess that this guy doesn't really want to talk to me anymore, but I think somewhere around here, the last time I was scavenging around, I actually found some stuff. Or maybe not this time, I guess. But that's fine, because we can just continue on. The one thing that also kind of, you know, makes me a little bit upset is that you have these really cool cars in this game, but you only get to get in them in the very beginning, and then you never get to use them again. So that's like the one really other major big gripe that I have, is I wish that you could kind of use the cars to explore, you know, bigger parts of the station. But probably goes back to the fact that, again, you know, this team had rather small budgets for doing this kind of stuff, so you can't really fault them for some of these things. So the Vulture's Nest is where most of the stuff that you do in terms of orders and in terms of doing various things in terms of upgrades and in terms of actually building an older mass as well, that's where most of that stuff is going to happen. They have a lot of really cool things, and you can also recruit folks to join your team as you sort of start traveling throughout the station. Now what I have found is that in this version of the game, it takes a bit of a while for them to actually spawn on you. So when you spawn into a new area, it takes a really long time to actually get your companions to spawn with you, which is a shame, because unfortunately, you know, these guys, you know, they definitely do a huge difference in terms of supporting you, especially later on when you end up really just kind of, running into a whole bunch of really big enemies that, you can then have your companions draw fire for you so that you don't end up losing your health. And then once you're done with combat, you can typically heal your companions back up to, a fairly reasonable amount of health so that they can help you out again. And, that just makes getting through some of these missions like a breeze, because you end up really just kind of killing a whole bunch of people with ease and having somebody else that can watch your back. And that's, that's just like, it makes a huge difference in terms of what you're able to do. Now, these traveling merchants you'll see around fairly frequently as well. They typically have quite a bit to offer, and sometimes they even have better items than the merchants that you see in the actual towns in the game. So now let's see if I can kind of dump some of the stuff off on this guy, because I definitely have a bunch of junk that I'm not going to be using anytime soon. Let's see if he will take it. Now, occasionally you can also sell so much stuff that the merchants actually end up running out of money to, to give you. And that always definitely sucks, because, when you end up running into that problem, you can't peddle stuff off to them. And especially if you're overloaded at that time, it makes it kind of difficult to actually be able to, sort of achieve your end goals or get somewhere where you were going before faster. So that's just kind of one of those, negative side effects. Now, if you see something like this, the shields, they actually do help you out later on in the game when you end up going into a melee contest. Now, you can choose to not go and do the melee. I think it's not like 100% critical to completing the game, but I believe that if you do end up going that route, you not only gain some good experience, but you also end up actually basically getting some good weapons and completing a sort of side story, which is actually pretty fun. And I believe that once you've completed a part of that mission, you can actually just continue fighting folks within the arena, which also gets you an achievement in the game. And it's just also a lot of fun, because unless you were a melee character throughout this whole kind of time leading up to that event, doing some melee is going to be just a lot of fun in general. So it's always a good time to do those sorts of things. Now, you noticed I picked up 2 items here in my inventory. The AI module is going to be a part of a separate mission later on, as is the Axis 707, I believe, although it could be the Gralum or Gralum or however you pronounce it. Generally, any of these sort of specialized items that you find, you want to hold on to, because again, later on, there will be some merchants that will actually ask you for those items, so you can complete missions a lot faster without having to travel around to all the various different merchants throughout the different parts of the station, potentially losing health in the process. So that way it just makes it a lot easier for you to complete the various tasks that they assign to you. Just makes it a ton easier. Now, something else is the Vulture's Nest actually has a locker for you where you can store your stuff, and technically there are 2 lockers. I don't know if you can store stuff in both of them without having it disappear, but I know for a fact that your personal locker is generally a good area to be able to pick up or store additional items that you're not using right away. So that's one thing that makes life, just a breeze for you, because then you're not carrying heavy stuff on you all the time. And even though I hate stopping at these, I generally do like to pick up the various parts of junk that they have in here. By and large, you can find some really good little tidbits that you can then use to assemble better things. Usually you find like parts for ammo or electronic parts that you can use for hacking. And then of course you've got these guys. So this is Brigo, is another one of those kind of more famous folks that you'll run into throughout your travels. So it doesn't look like I have too much to sell him except for some of these stuff. And I guess that's about it. For the rest of these things, I'm going to hold on to them and store them into my locker once I get back, because some of this stuff, like I said, is going to be useful later on, and that makes a huge difference. I believe that I should be able to just exit from here. And I think that after this, there's basically a bunch of sort of like smaller missions that you end up going on before they have like another sort of major big battle. So mostly you'll be kind of doing a bunch of different errands. Now, I believe that there are some people that you'll run into throughout the game as well that can potentially, send things going in a different direction entirely from what you, might have been experiencing or expecting at that point. and there basically just are a bunch of these that end up happening. Now, again, in the last game, I made a bunch of choices that I feel like I'm going to do differently this time around, just to see sort of which path it takes, because I want to kind of see the other endings. It's actually pretty cool, the endings that they do have. Some of them were a little bit predictable once you've reached sort of, closer to endgame, but, on the other hand, some of the other ones that I haven't seen yet, I definitely want to check out, just to see, what else can be actually changed on the station, or if you ever end up potentially leaving the station even, so that you can kind of figure things like that out. So that'd be kind of neat. Let's see if I can talk to these guys here. I don't think there's actually too much. Yeah, so it looks like they're not telling me too much, but that guy right there is one of the folks that you can recruit for your, for your team. And you can see I've actually already stored a bunch of stuff in here, but it's always a good idea to just store additional things that you're not using at that particular moment in time, because you never know when you're gonna need them later on for some other mission. And that way, you can just come back to a central place and always be able to find that stuff. So it just makes it that much easier for you. So you don't have to keep traveling back and forth between the different various portions. You can just go back to one spot and have everything that you need exactly where you need it. And I believe that one of these batteries is actually one of the ones that you will use to fix a suit of armor later on. Now you can choose to do that part of the mission sort of a lot earlier on, but for at least the time being, I think that I'm probably not gonna do it, because that's gonna take way too long for today's stream, I believe. So let's see what it says. So he says, of course, you've done a really great job, and now we've got a new sort of task to complete, and we'll leave it off here for tonight, and then we'll continue there doing the next section. If you guys have any questions, any comments, if you want to sort of find out more about the game, feel free to leave comments in the video, or feel free to just message me. You can also go on my account's Facebook and send me messages there. I usually tend to reply. And so with that, guys, that'll be it for the stream for today.